Hello. Welcome to day 2 of the Global Women's Leadership Forum. I'm your host today, Cindy Pace, and it's my pleasure to be back hosting our sessions. Today we are focusing on driving change. So our first webcast is around driving change together, which is part of our theme, Lead with Purpose and Impact. Throughout our discussion, you can submit questions using the chat function in MetLife Tube. Those of you joining us live, you're joining me through MetLife Tube, so you don't need to go to any other website. You can enter your questions right on the chat using the chat function right on your screen. I am so excited to have with me this morning Susan Podlogar. How are you? Our new Chief Human Resources Officer here at MetLife. And Susan, you're going to help us lead our next session. We're going to kick it off. I'm excited to have you.
Thank you. I'm excited to be here. Host extraordinaire. So,
thank you.
Yes.
That's job security. Thank you, Susan. It is. It's wonderful to have you. And so what I want to do before we go into our panel, we have two other great women joining us, is really do some highlights from yesterday. So yesterday we focused our conversation on the future. And I know that's one of subjects that's very near and dear to your heart, very special. And we had an industry expert here who really took us through what are the current trends that are impacting the world, but also might be impacting our industry, and learned a little bit about that, and then ways that we could build our own skills in terms of understanding how to scan the horizon. So that was really exciting.
And with Amy, what she brought as well is this whole concept of how do you turn uncertainty into possibilities? And so not being nervous about the future, but just really looking at it with the possibilities, which I loved. And then the other thing, which is near and dear to my heart, is this whole concept of learning. And how do you be prepared for the future? And how do you become your own futurist is by continual learning and continual upskilling, and in adjacent areas that you haven't done before. So it's really about augmenting your skills and augmenting your language in order to be prepared for the future. So I thought that was very cool from Amy.
Very cool.
Yes.
We're a learning organization, so that was a great point to make. We also heard from many of our associates on Yammer, and they offered different insights that would really help us understand how you viewed the webcast and what you got from it. Many of you found the interactive masterclass that we had with Sally Helgeson very helpful and thought-provoking. And here's what you shared with us. So here are a few things that people said. This is an exercise that all of you can do to uncover your purpose. So people felt that the exercise that Sally provided was really helpful in uncovering their purpose and their vision.
Yes.
Really framing that vision statement. And one thing she said was, be succinct and really keep it concise. Don't say too many things. So people like that. They also like the research on noticing, like a radar, how women notice things. Basically, she talked about the two different aspects of how men and women view vision. And for women, we have more of a broad spectrum type of focus.
Scanning.
We're scanning, whereas men are laser focused. And we talked about the power of diversity, and if you bring those two skill sets together, it could be absolutely powerful. So that was great. So much was explained about that. And my takeaway was really around being fully present. And the role that having a vision statement has, or just a vision for yourself, has in you being present and focused on what is important to you.
Yes, and I loved that part, and I loved your statement, have a Twitter-friendly vision statement. And so what that does is really make sure that you are succinct. You have only so many characters in order to be able to pull that through. And the other thing I really loved about her conversation is really making sure that you revisit it. And so it's continually relevant. And so I thought that, along with the tools and actually going through the process. I was in the room writing out my vision, and it's very impactful and very powerful. And so that's what I think this is all about. This program and this whole series is about us learning and how can we be better leaders, and how can we connect in times of change to our purpose and to our passions.
Absolutely. And thank you so much for being one of the 50 viewing groups that we had globally
Sure.
and hosting a session with our HR associates. That was fantastic.
That was
I've heard
awesome.
great feedback. So it's been great to have the discussion on yesterday, but what we want to do is talk about what's ahead of us. So we have a second great day, and we're all glad that you can join us for this first discussion. As you see here, I have Susan with me, but we also would like to introduce two more incredible women who will also speak about their personal experience in driving change. First up, we have Kim Azzarelli. And Kim is a business, philanthropic, and legal advisor focused on advancing women and girls. Kim is a co-founder of Seneca Point, a unique advisory organization built on a growing body of research from the World Bank to the United Nations that demonstrates that when women progress, the world progresses. She's also the author of the book, Fast Forward: How Women Can Achieve Power and Purpose. Also with us is Joy Gordon, who is the Chief Executive Officer of Dress for Success Worldwide. Since joining the organization in 1999 as the first volunteer and taking the helm in 2002, Joy has been devoted to establishing Dress for Success as a recognized leader in the economic and social development of disadvantaged women. Joy has been recognized by renowned organizations for her achievements and her commitment, including Crane's New York Business, the Financial Times, and Black Enterprise Magazine. Welcome to our discussion, Kim and Joy.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
All right, so now we're going to get into it. And as we all know, this is a topic that's just near and dear to each of us. Purpose is at the heart of what we do, correct? So we've all talked individually about where purpose fits in our lives. What I want to start off with today is sharing a little bit of what does purpose mean? So when I say purpose, it may mean one thing. When someone else says purpose, it means another thing. So what we noticed is McKinsey and the Center for Talent Innovation did some research that shows purpose and meaning is very important to how women lead, how they manage, how they interact with their families, their friends, society in general. And purpose has been defined as the why. Why we do what we do, beyond personal ambition, status, and reward. So it's about fulfilling work that really impacts you in service to others. I like the in service to others piece, but what I want to ask each of you is, what is your definition of purpose? Susan, let's start with you.
It's a great question. When I reflect back on when I look at purpose, for me, I call it a compass with a solar panel. And why is because it gives me direction and it's energizing, right? And so, but it's naturally energizing. So if you have the core of your purpose, you know your direction, and it will also give you energy and tailwinds to help you move forward. So that's how I...
Oh, that's extremely powerful. And it's very aligned to also how I define purpose, as well as Robin Ely at Harvard School of Business. She talks about purpose being this anchor, you know, that really centers you. And in my research, I talk about the way that purpose serves as that guide, even in times of challenge. You know, you can still stay the course. What about you, Joy? What does purpose mean for you?
So purpose for me, I live by this quote that I heard many years ago, and it's a beautiful quote by Mark Twain, which says there are really two important days in your life: the day you were born and the day you figure out why you were born. And so it's the why, right? And so to your point, I feel like my why is that I was born to be a compass, to direct and navigate other people's lives. And so when you figure out who you are, and why you were put here, and it then drives where you're going. I think purpose also is this intersection of understanding what your strength is and your passion. And so when you understand your strength and your passion, you find your purpose. And so that's what it's been for me.
Oh, that's excellent. It's like I have like a mathematical P equals strength. Or times, or it could be multiplied by, I don't know. Sounds like a great equation. The PACE equation.
Yes.
Love it.
Oh,
the
gosh.
purpose equation.
Oh, Lord.
Kim, what about you? How do you define purpose?
Well, it's hard to add to what was just said. But first of all, I want to thank you for having me. This is really a pleasure to meet all of you and to be with you. And I've been following Joy's work for many years. And I just learned that she was the first volunteer, so now I'm amazed, completely amazed. But for me, very similar to what you said, purpose is sort of finding this larger arc in your life, this larger arc of meaning that helps you sort of navigate where you want to go. Exactly as you just said, it's the why. Why are you doing what you're doing? Because we all know the what, and we spend a lot of time on the what, and I have lists and lists of what. But the question is really the why. And for me, and I think we'll get into this, purpose for me has been the great illuminator, really, for me. It's given me, I love the compass with solar power, because purpose is the great energizer. And in our research, but mostly from my own experience, if you can use your power for purpose, which is how we like to talk about it, there's probably nothing better. And it really changes dimensionally the way you think about your work in life. So for me, purpose is the thing that lights up everything else. And when you put purpose first, I hope we'll get into this, things start to really change. And so for each person, it's different, right? What motivates you, what gives you meaning is different. But finding that meaning for yourself, I think that's the great journey of life. And when you do, if you sort of really be honest with yourself and you look at what's going on around you, you see things open up that weren't there before. So,
absolutely, and we will. Let's expand the conversation. So we've defined, each of us, what it means for us. Let's talk about how it manifests in our lives and in our careers. So how has purpose played a role in your career and leadership journey? Kim, I know that you have numerous stories, but share with us.
Not enough time for those.
Yeah, but share with us something that, you think that the audience needs to hear and they can apply to their own lives.
I mean, thankfully I wrote a book, thank goodness, because otherwise I can talk a lot. So I'll try to be Twitter style succinct, as you say. But for me, I'm a corporate lawyer by background, so I'm a securities lawyer. And I practiced law for 12 years, and I was the corporate secretary of Avon, and I've done a lot of securities law work, and I really actually enjoy the law, so I like practicing law. But what changed my life and my career dimensionally, and I have to say, it was when I went to a panel discussion by a foundation called the Virtue Foundation, where a surgeon who I actually knew, who was sort of a friend of mine, who I was involved a bit with the Virtue Foundation, his name is Dr. Olahi. He's a surgeon at Mount Sinai. And he volunteers just he does a lot with this foundation. And he had just come back from Cambodia, where he was treating acid violence victims. Now, that was the first time I had heard about acid violence. This was maybe 12 years ago or so. And he had treated a 6-week-old baby who had been doused with acid while she was breastfeeding with her mother. And basically the community said, or some people in the community said, just throw her out, we'll make another. And there was no penalty for the person who threw acid on the mother and baby while she was breastfeeding. The baby was blinded in one eye, the mother was burned 30% of her body. And I, being a lawyer, right, at the Company for Women, sitting in the audience, could not believe that in this day and age, there could be acid violence against a 6-week-old baby with no penalty. And that the whole idea was to steal a woman's beauty through acid violence. That was the whole purpose, right? So when I learned that, I thought to myself, surely, Kim, there's something you can do. I mean, really, if you can't do something about this, or if you can't get involved in some way, who can? So one thing led to another, and it led to this incredible journey for me, which first I went to the then CEO of Avon, which was Andrea Jung, who was, when she learned the story, she was like, we've got to do something. Then by an unbelievable turn of circumstances, which is in my book, I met Justice Sandra Day O'Connor, the first woman Supreme Court Justice, and when I told her about the story, she was supportive of me. And one thing led to another, and we ended up starting the Center for Women in Justice, and the people at the center really ended up changing the laws and having impact in changing law in different countries. But what I realized was, as soon as my whole career changed for me in that moment, when I realized, I loved my job, by the way. I loved practicing law. But when I could practice and use my platform, use my position for something bigger than myself, I had a totally different step about me. I had a whole nother level of energy. And ever since then, again, which is a long journey, that is what I have come to realize. And doing the research in this book, I then learned it's scientific. It's actually scientific. There are professors of happiness from Harvard to Stanford to Wharton, and I always say in my next life I want to be a professor of happiness because that sounds like a great job. But I mean, it is scientific. The way to happiness is a scientific formula. There really is a formula. And really part of it is putting purpose at the center of your work. And it's not about quitting your day job. I always say don't quit your day job unless you really feel you have to. But don't quit your day job, but you can use your day job for something larger. And that dimensionally changed my life. Really, truly changed my life, changed my career. I really believe that the things that happened to me in my career, I mean, I was doing great, don't get me wrong.
Right.
I was young, I was the corporate secretary of Avon, I was running all these great things. But the people and the way I was able to bring myself to the job changed. And I think that's it. I mean, to me, that's the difference that purpose makes. And when you were saying about helping others, there's this high that you get called helper's high.
Right.
And this idea that, you know, putting service first, as you said, Cindy,
Yes.
really dimensionally changes the way you think about your life and work. And it became an addiction for me. Helper's addiction. And all of a sudden I thought, well, I could do more. Maybe I could use for this, for that. And, you know,
Right.
and so here we are.
So, I
Interesting.
mean,
Beautiful.
it is. I mean, that
Yes.
is such a great story, Kim. A lot of key nuggets in there. The thing that really connects me to your story, and it was like an aha when you said it, is you didn't just sit there and say, ooh, that's devastating. You know, when you heard about the acid violence in Cambodia, something in you went into, what can I do? And that is service orientation, and that led you, expanded, you know, your career, but pivoted and moved you into a different space where you can actually act on these things. That's extremely powerful, and it's an excellent example of when you listen and act in service of others, what can be done.
Sure.
So thank you for sharing that story.
awesome.
Joy. So I was talking to Joy, and one of the things I remember when I first met you, Joy, is your story around Dress for Success, and you being the first volunteer. That's what I call it. And Joy was like, was I the first volunteer? Yes, you were. So Joy, can you share with us that story, and I'll come back to you if you have other stories. When you were watching television, similar to Kim, something happened that changed your career from law as well.
Exactly.
So something about the law.
I know.
We love
Here's
justice.
what's different.
We love justice.
Between Kim and I. I hated it.
Okay.
I didn't want to
So
be a
you
lawyer.
were looking to get out.
Didn't want to be a lawyer at all. Right? It was
Okay.
my father's dream, not mine.
Oh,
And
okay.
so, you know, I was living his dream for him by going to law school, right? Because he was an immigrant, and to be a doctor, a lawyer, an accountant meant something. And so I followed his dream. And so I gave him a law degree. But that's not what I wanted to do. And so I came out of law school and got a job offered to me, and so I was in the district attorney's office as a prosecutor. But to the story that you're speaking about, I happened to be bright and early, getting ready for work, putting on my power suit, ready to hit the courthouse, and watching the news. And I saw our founder, Nancy Loveland, talking about how she started this organization with $5,000 and how she believed that it was going to be an organization that was going to save lives of women around the world. And I thought, how brilliant is that? And she talked about the importance of the suit. And I knew it. I wore a suit every day to work. I walked the mean streets of South Bronx from the train station to the courthouse. And I'd walk through those streets in a suit, and everybody knew I was a lawyer. And I felt empowered, I felt emboldened, I felt successful. And so I knew what the suit meant. And so really all I wanted to do was donate a suit to the organization. But when I talked to Nancy over the phone, I realized fast and furious, like, I need to get involved with this. So I became the volunteer / a board member. In a year, I left what I was doing to work in the basement of a church. And of course, Dad didn't get it at first.
Right.
But he later, you know, before he passed, he later commended me on making such a wise choice in my journey. I found my passion. I found my purpose. I didn't have it in the courthouse. In fact, I was really conflicted by the work that I was doing. It felt as though the purpose there was to incarcerate. The purpose there was to clean the streets of that community by incarcerating people and not looking for their second chance. At Dress for Success, I give women a second, third, and sometimes a fourth chance. And so for me, this is the most rewarding part of my life. I like to say, I've been here now 19 years, and my son is 19 years old, so I say it's been the best 19 years of my life, and my daughter's 21. She goes, well, what about those other 2 years? The miserable too, when it was just you and I and my husband. But it has been amazing. I've grown up here. I've learned about who I am as a person and who I want to be as a leader and as a mom and as a wife and as a friend to women because of Dress for Success. So it has totally changed the trajectory of probably the path that I was going to be on. And so funny as it is, because I then started to, as a volunteer at Dress for Success, I started to treat people differently in the courthouse. I started to see people differently. They were no longer invisible to me. I became known as the worst prosecutor in the Bronx.
So you became very kind?
I was very kind. I was very kind. I was very kind. I was very considerate. I was very caring. And I asked questions, and I wanted to see how, by whatever was the means to the ends, ultimately your life could be different. Sure. And so it just changed me. Dress for Success changed me.
So that's another, key point around working with purpose and being in the thing that inspires you. And both of you, I think the other thing about purpose to make here also with your example, Joy, is you channeled your talents and skills into something that mattered to you and mattered to others. So you can have passion, that's great, but you took what you were equipped to do, skilled to do, and said, I want to do it in this way. And then you talk about how it changed you. Right. It changed your leadership. Yes. It changed how you treated people. That is extremely powerful. And you didn't know that one call, nope. Nancy, can I give you my suit? Exactly. Would lead to this. And so, but you stayed the course. And that's why we call it like the leadership journey. Right. Because once you start, there are things.
Works, right?
That's how it works.
Plan. It's not necessarily as you plan it. I just wanted to pick up on one thing that you said, and you were also saying, this concept of service. I think what really, and there's a quote in this book that was meaningful to me, because this idea that when you're putting yourself out there for the benefit of others, that's sort of the highest order in a sense that you can have. And I think it changes our perspectives. I think she's saying it changed me. That little girl changed my life because it broadened my perspective. Until that point, I was doing my normal thing, complaining about my day-to-day life, And then when I was talking to my friend Dr. Lahi, he said, one day I was complaining, and I said, have you been to Cambodia? And I was like, Cambodia? What's he talking about, Cambodia? I don't even have time to I was complaining about how much work I had or something. And in hindsight, what I realized through all this was that it broadened my own perspective of what the world is, and my problems, quote unquote, or I took for granted so much of my own life. And so it created this sort of lens of gratitude for me, because normally we're just comparing ourselves to our media friends, right? Like it's keeping up with the Gateses, or it's not even keeping up with the Joneses. It's keeping up with, I used to say Brangelina, but that doesn't work anymore. But it's keeping up with all these celebrities that are in our lives, and these sort of photoshopped, Instagrammed images, when that's not the world. And so everyone seems to feel a little bit down on themselves and down in their life, and if only I had done this, and if only I had had that. But when you find your purpose, or use your power for purpose, as we say, or we phrase, all of a sudden that lens opens up a lot. And there's this incredible quote that I have to give you from Dr. Lahi, because he said that he was saying one of the most effective ways to reframe your life is through service of others. And he quoted his grandfather, who was sort of a philosopher, he was a philosopher and jurist, and said, he says, he paraphrased my grandfather, Ustad Alahi, we should be grateful for the opportunity to do good, in part because we ourselves have the most to gain by doing so.
Absolutely.
And so he says, when you view your life through this lens of a larger purpose, you create this larger arc where day-to-day events become little dusty storms on the road of your larger journey. And so the things that were so,
That's so powerful. Absolutely, Susan, because I'd love to hear from you and how it's different
Yes.
for us. Yes.
Well, and just in terms of this concept of servant leadership, I am very much aligned to that. I grew up in a very large family, as some folks know. I'm the 9th child.
Oh, wow.
And so for me, I saw my parents volunteer continually, right, and bring out the potential and bring out the best in others. But I wish I could say my purpose came through a aha moment. It didn't. I wandered. I would say, it's that navigation, but I wandered, and through my career, early in my career, I let performance be my navigator. And so I always went to the company of where they wanted me to go in terms of my next job. And when I sat back and reflected, I was like looking at this, and I was almost a spectator in my career rather than that navigator, that term of navigator compass, right? And then I got a gift, a beautiful gift, and it was one of these programs, and whether it's the one we're talking about in terms of navigating purpose, it's the Human Performance Institute at the company where I was. And so I went through that, and it wasn't this aha spark that happened to have purpose. It was 3 days of deep reflection, and it was peeling back the onion and just really going deeper, deeper, deeper of why am I here, to your point.
Sure.
And why am I here, and what is it? And then, you reflect in your life, and how have you been shaped, how have you been molded throughout your life? And what I came to when I really got to the core of it was reflecting on my family and how my parents raised us. With 9 children, they never raised anyone differently.
Wow.
That we all had gifts. And so I will figure out how to bring out the potential and the best of each one of you. And so that was true in my core, and that's what I was able to bring then to my work, is then how do I bring out that potential of others? How do I bring out the potential in the organization? And after I realized that, I just felt so much more that I became the driver of my career rather than the spectator. And so it was a really compelling moment, and it was also, and the first time I was able to use that is, my boss actually asked me a question that nobody had ever asked me before. And he said, "What do you want?" And I had said to him, my first answer was, "Well, what do you mean, what do I want? I've always done what the company wants. What do we need?" And he said, "That's not what I want. I want to know, what do you want?" And so then I was able to reflect back on my purpose, and I was able to define it. And when I went back to him and I said, "This is it. Can I have a week before I answer you?" It took me a week. And I asked him afterwards, I said, "Is that the amount of time people take answering this question?" He said, "For women, yes." He said, "A man has a response the minute I answer I ask the question." And so that was very compelling. I would have never known that because, going through this. So I think there are gifts that we can give to our employees, and there is just by asking simple questions. What do you want? And really giving them the tools to understand their purpose, then we can marry those two and help on this pathway so they too can be fulfilled.
Thank you for sharing that story, Susan. I'm really connected as well, because I feel I had the same type of path where I was wandering, but I was also looking to do the thing that I thought was helpful, but I wasn't connected with it. And then I got to a point, I was actually a clinical researcher in oncology. Like, what more can you do? I mean, you're in oncology, and I was disconnected, and I felt guilty. I didn't want people to know. Guilty and shameful, because I'm like, okay, I'm working on this blockbuster drug that has all these wonderful indications that can help people manage, and in some case, totally just ratify their cancer, but I'm not connected to this work. And what I recognize is something that you also said, the knowing that there is a void, but to keep looking.
Yes.
Because you could have said, I don't really know. And you just could have stayed on the path, and you could have just been the wanderer.
Yes.
But to re-navigate and say, I want to be a driver in my career, and I want to channel what I know to help people unleash their potential. It reignited you to where you already were, but now you had a vision, which we talked about yesterday. Now you had a vision, and you had a focus on the impact that you wanted to make. So I think that's really important, because each of you have very diverse experiences, and Kim, you pivoted out of corporate law and went into a space where you're doing a lot of advocacy work. You're still doing law temporarily. And Joy, you're leading a global organization that's really impacting women and families. And Susan, you are leading human resources, a people organization at one of the largest, insurance companies in the world, and coming in and letting people know that purpose matters. So this is just showing that purpose is not one thing. It's not, I will get my purpose when I go and I volunteer elsewhere.
Right.
You can get your purpose right here at MetLife or any company. You can seek your purpose and listen and pivot if you need to, but understanding, like you said, Joy, I know I was miserable.
Yes.
And you said, I have to renavigate. We have to listen to ourselves, and when we don't listen, we kind of delay, right? We delay what we want. You're thinking about something, Kim. I'm seeing it. You have a thought coming
I
to.
don't want to leave the impression, and I talk about this a lot, and when I say temporarily leaving the law, I'm still involved with the law, so I don't want you to think I've thrown the law overboard, because I haven't.
Right.
For me, it's kind of core to who I am. But I just don't want anyone to walk away with the impression that there's an aha moment and then everything's rosy in your life.
Right.
That's not how it goes.
Yes, sure.
So, some days you wake up, as Dion von Fursten said, the DVF says, you feel like a loser. Some, you wake up, even DVF, right? Like, we're talking about Dion von Furstenberg, and she says, I wake up in the morning, sometimes I feel like a loser. This is the human condition, and what I learned from this book tour, after talking to literally thousands and thousands of people, was that there is consistency of the human condition, and that's the experience of my life too, which is that life is a continuous journey. It's not that there's a moment, you get it, you find your purpose, and like check the box and everything's wonderful. Like some days you wake up, you feel great. Some days you wake up, you don't feel great. You've got to always be readjusting the compass. It's kind of like Waze.
Right.
Maybe there's traffic on that block now. You're going the other direction.
Right.
So like it's a constant thing, and your purpose changes over life in some ways. Maybe the tactics of your purpose. But if you find that bigger arc of meaning that Dr. Elahi is talking about, I was saying earlier in the green room, I had to do a panel at the New York Academy of Science on on happiness on this topic, and I was sitting next to a man named Darren McMahon who wrote The History of Happiness, right?
Oh, wow.
Starting with like Aristotle, et cetera. So I would say, if you're going to ask about Aristotle, what he says, right? But what was interesting for me about that is that it confirms all the happiness research of now, and it's the same over time. And even Aristotle, and I wanted to write the quote down for you guys, but even Aristotle basically is talking about the idea that if you're living with virtue, then you're creating a halo of happiness around yourself. And so this idea, and so he uses the term virtue, that means a lot of things in today's world, but what we're saying is if you're living with purpose, and you're trying to put that into practice, then you create this halo of happiness. And our culture, unfortunately, is more about the need reduction form of happiness, which is smiley face, emoji, I'm happy, I got the house, I bought the shoes. I buy a lot of shoes, so I get it. But the point is that that's need reduction. That's not the true happiness that I think we're talking about. And there's different qualities of happiness. And so, I think this idea that we're on this journey, it's changing. We're changing beings, right? That's our, and I think that's why your institute was. It is the hard work, and it's the 3 days that she did of work to uncover what it was about her, which direction she wanted to take. But we know that Susan probably feels the same way, that this is ongoing. You're refining yourself, you're learning about yourself. I mean, I'm learning about myself every day. I mean, 2 days ago we did this great event at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, and one of the organizations that we featured was Girl Scouts Troop 6000, which was the troop created for homeless girls in New York City. Now, I tell you that those 6 girls have changed my life. This is 2 days ago, right? I've been working on these issues for 25 years on women's issues, and I wrote my college essay about homelessness in New York City because I grew up in New York City. I tell you that I learned so much on these 6 girls on Saturday night that I really feel changed. I feel that something has changed in me. And so I think it's this constant journey and finding, reaffirming your purpose, sharpening that tool,
Exactly.
I was going to say, a lot of people wait for that moment in life, whether it's, you're over a certain age and you're looking to retire, and then it's like, I need to find my purpose, right? Or, it's like, you've waited, now you're going to find your purpose.
Right.
Or there's been some catastrophe or situation in your life, and then, you need to look through the lens and find your purpose. Well, I shared with you recently, Last year, I was faced with stage 2 breast cancer. And living through that experience, I asked myself through the process and at the end, what is my purpose? Has my purpose shifted? Because I've now been faced with this situation in my life. Will I go on to do something different? Like, is this going to redefine who I am?
Right.
And it just didn't. I am clear about who I am and what I'm giving to, but I know it has opened me up to just a whole nother giving area in my life. The sisterhood of survivors and helping women get through it. And so I gained a lot of strength from the women at Dress for Success, which are the most resilient women on the planet, women who go through a lot more than I will ever go through in my life and still get up every morning with a smile on their face and take care of their children and themselves. And so, but I know that my purpose is redefining to some extent.
Wow.
And I will probably look to work in that space more because the impact is real. And I know exactly what it feels like, and I want to make sure that I'm there for men and women who are going through cancer. So let me say to you, as a researcher in the oncology world, thank you.
Exactly.
Oh,
Thank you for what you did, because I'm sure your work saved lives. And so even though you can't connect the complete
it back.
dots, it definitely brought purpose to you.
Thank
and to
you.
me.
And that's helped me redefine that moment, in my life. So thank you, Joy, and thank you for sharing. What you and Kim said, and Susan, I want to also bring you in, is reframing that purpose is not always this happy moment and emojis. I love that. Like, here's purpose, and our hands are up.
It can be
But
scary.
purpose can be scary.
It can be scary.
We're sharing here what we've just heard from you, Joy, is how purpose played a role in at a difficult time, in a difficult situation. Susan, for you, how has purpose emerged in times of difficulty?
Purpose brought me, not in times of difficulty, I would say, but a challenging decision time.
Okay, to challenge.
And so, and it's why I'm here at MetLife. And I was at a great company, and I loved the people I work with, but I knew deep down I could do more. I could contribute more to the world. I could touch more lives. I could impact not only the discipline of human resources, but every employee that walks in the door each day to say, how do they spend their 8 to 10 hours and be more fulfilled? But purpose gave me courage to be able to do that, because you're standing on a skinny branch. I gave up something that was extremely secure. I could have retired from that place and done very well financially and done well, but I took a big leap. I moved in 3 weeks. I moved my job, industry, my home in 3 weeks to start something new, and gave up a job after 16 years. But it gave me that courage deeply to say, I can do more. And so when you have that true north sitting in for that compass, then it does. And women do not take chances as much as men do. And this, Lean In and Sheryl Sandberg talks about this a lot. And we know that women tend to jump a little bit when it's a little bit more secure, but it was that purpose that gave me the opportunity to stand on this skinny branch.
Well, we are so glad you did.
Yes,
and we're happy to have you here. You're off the branch, right? We're on ground. So what I want to do is bring in our associates here at MetLife. We have people sending in questions. Thank you for those of you that have sent in questions through our chat function on MetLife Tube. We have a question here for the entire panel. Who is your go-to advisor or mentor when you need advice? And why is it this person? So who is a person that you're like, oh my gosh, what am I going to do? And that's the person that you go to. Why do you go to them?
I think I have a board.
You have a board, so it's not one person.
No, I think I've only learned this about myself recently. I'm a little bit of a surveyor, but maybe because I was a corporate secretary, I'm used to boardrooms or something, but I have a few different people that I call to get different perspectives, and then I think it through. But certainly I have some key friends, very close friends, other people who I feel share my values, even if they're not close friends, people who I really, and then, of course my mom. And my husband, because they all bring different things to the table.
Right, right. What about
Yeah,
you?
it's the kitchen cabinet. Right?
Exactly.
Oh, the kitchen cabinet. The kitchen
Yeah,
cabinet.
it's a group. It's a collective series of voices that you need to hear from. Some who give you tough advice, who give you the constructive criticism you need, those that keep your eyes wide open, and keep helping you avoid the pitfalls.
Right.
So it is a series of people. It's not that one person. And you get a little bit from everybody, and it's important to put people who challenge you and challenge your thinking.
Yes.
So that, and people who, if you're not a risk taker like me, I'm not really a risk taker. My husband's the risk taker. I'm not, we have to say there has to be one stable one in the family. But, you know, I have somebody who pushes me to take risks because she knows that I'm not a risk taker. So I'll share something with her and say, these are the reasons why I wouldn't do it. And she's now, tell me the reasons why you would do it. And what's your fear? And let's get past the fear and get forward. And so you just have to surround yourself with people who are your kitchen cabinet, who are your advisors, your board members, but a team of talent around you to make you more talented in yourself.
So I have a chairman of the board that I go to, who is my husband. So,
I like that, chairman of the board.
Chairman of my board. And
With veto power.
Exactly. And, you know, we've been married for over 30 years, and so he knows me inside and out. He's seen every journey that I've been through. He knows what drives me, and he's an analytical PhD organic chemist, so he's very analytical. So decisions become a little bit more, analytical versus I lead a lot with my heart. He leads a lot with his head. So it's a really great balance of that heart-head. And then I also, if it's a decision that it impacts the family, I always go to the kids. And they will talk about pushing. They're the pushers in the family in terms of really looking at, challenging me and looking at some of the implications as well. So
I think that's great. I mean, you all have great boards of advisors, and the key thing I'm hearing here from each of you is they know you. There's a difference between someone, mentoring you just kind of lightly off of what they may think they know about you, but these people really know you. And to your point, Joy, the pushback, you get that from your kids challenge you as well, that you were saying, Susan. But having someone that really holds the mirror up and reminds you, you said you wanted to do this, but you're doing this. So when we're incongruent, having that board to bring us back to the purpose and the impact that we want to make becomes extremely important. And they're on the journey with you, because sometimes you don't see the progress you're making in your own life. And they have to remind you, listen, a couple of years ago you were over here doing this thing, and now you've really stepped into what you want to do, like you said, Susan. All the changes that you just made in your decision, but you're better for it, you know? So we have one more question that has come in through the chat function. Please keep them coming in. We love to hear from you. If you haven't found your purpose yet, I hear this a lot, people saying, like, how do I find my purpose? So if you haven't found it yet, do you have any recommendations of how someone can find their purpose? How can they uncover this core, this compass that we're talking about, the true north? I'll start with you, Kim. What do you know about that?
We have a whole toolkit in our book around finding your purpose and knowing your power, because our sort of formula is know your power. So know your strengths, know your talents, then find your purpose. What gets you up in the morning? What gives you meaning? What are you interested in? What are you naturally, sort of moving towards? What do you think about? And then connect with others. I think we haven't talked about that yet, but this whole idea that connecting with others, I call it sort of your purpose posse, but
I like that.
not intentionally, it's short, Twitter format.
My purpose posse.
Yeah, Twitter format, but find people who can surround you, because sometimes in your day-to-day life you get stuck, right? And it may not be, for example, like I'm thinking traditional corporate work, because I grew up in traditional corporate. And so it may be, it may not be your boss, or it may not even be someone in your department, but there might be somebody else in the company who shares the same values or shares the same idea. And so you can work across departments, but it's about sort of finding people who share your drive, really, about what you're interested in. And then for me, again, and I think it's hard to be formulaic, because only you will know what motivates you, right? For some people, it's for us, obviously, it's advancing women and girls. I mean, I think we share this pretty heavily, and this is how we all connected. For other people, it's other things. You know, the larger arc of purpose that I'm talking about is even beyond a tactical thing that you're doing, but it's, again, the why of your life. You know, what do you want to accomplish here? Why do you think you've been put here? What are we supposed to do here?
Right.
So I think there's a lot of that in the book, and in the toolkit in particular. But for me, the purpose posse is really important because that helps uncover your purpose for you. So I see Cindy, we get together, you know, how many times have we met? 3 times? I feel like I've known you maybe 10 years.
Right,
you know,
right.
because we share the same underlying values. So we can just skip all the, like, you know, last 10 years of chit chat and go straight to, like, and then this is how I'm going to put it, this is how I'm using my work for this, and this is what we can do for women. And when you do that, again, I always think about Justice O'Connor, because what are the odds? I mean, I don't know how many lawyers graduate from law school every year, but it's a lot, right? There's thousands and thousands of women lawyers, thousands. So, and we all want to meet Justice O'Connor and Justice Sotomayor. There are rock stars. That's our version of a rock star, right?
Right.
So the odds of me being able to work with her in some way was only because we connected over this concept of ending violence against women.
Right.
So finding your purpose posse, when you find other people, it reinforces your own purpose. So part of it's internal journey, and part of it is an external journey. And I think the combination is really important. So that's what I would say on finding your purpose.
And I would go on a little bit on the internal journey side. I think it does require a lot of reflection, but it also can. Every day you go through activities, and some are energizing. You know, I would say, build energy around you, and some drain energy, right? And just like people, build energy, drain energy. And so it's really finding those moments where you're really connecting, and you are just, that was a good moment for me. And what are the themes then that those have in common? And so you can keep peeling that back, and you can find it. And there's some great tools out there. I'm sure you're going to talk about some very good tools that we have here as well. And but there are all kinds of tools that people can use. But really, the 2 tools you'll have to use the most is your head and your heart. And it's really of just really reflection of, and I think HBR just put an article out last night on the lost art of reflection. And we get so caught up in activities and doing and tweeting and doing all of that, that we lose that quiet time. And it's that quiet time where you'll find purpose.
And that's so beautiful. And so I really can't say anything more than what you 2 have said, because you said it so brilliantly and beautifully. But I would just say, you have to just be in a reflection mode and constantly asking yourself, how do I fill my cup? Because sometimes our cup drains low. And so how am I going to fill my cup? And sometimes it happens in your job and in your career, and sometimes it just happens in your life.
Yes.
And so sometimes people feel like passion and purpose needs to equate to a career, and it absolutely does not.
Right.
You can fill your cup in so many ways that you find your purpose, and it has nothing to do with your 9 to 5. And so through volunteering and engagement and or crafting, or what is your joy? Like, what is your true joy? That's how you fill your cup, and that's how you feel like you lived a purposeful life, and that's how you create legacy, and that's how your life is memorable. I always say, I'm living out my dash, right? So I live in this world where on my tombstone there are going to be 2 important dates: the day I was born and the day I leave this earth. But I'm living my dash right now. And it's the dash. Cool. It's the stuff in between that matters the most. And so one of our Dress for Success clients one day forwarded me a note card. And she said, I just want you to look at this when you go home. Not now, but later. And so when I opened it up, it talked about, she thought that I was doing a brilliant job living my dash. And so I went further to say, what does she mean by my dash? And I was like, I get it. I'm living my dash. And so it's everything in the middle of that that matters. And you just have to find something that, if you weren't paid to do it, you would do it anyway. If you hit mega millions, you would still do this work, and you'd find a way to do it even more meaningfully because you have the funding to support your dream. So it's there. It's right in front of you. You just got to clear the forest for the trees and see it.
And the other thing, just to build on that, if I may, is your concept of others seeing it. I think you could ask other people too, because
Yes,
they
they
probably
see
see
it.
it. You don't see it. And I tell you, sometimes, you know, when you leave a job or you're moving on to something else, people will write you notes and they'll tell you how meaningful you were to them and what you meant to them and what you brought to them. And you don't realize that. And it waits till the end. So I always ask people, tell people in the moment what they mean, or tell people what their gifts are that they're bringing to you, because you are reinforcing their purpose. You're giving them confidence of what they can do. And I love your Dress for Success, and this is what I call Dress for Success from the inside, because I think on the inside, this purpose also gives you confidence.
It does.
Definitely. Well, then that the research bears out.
Yes.
I also wanted to say one other thing, which I want to make sure, again, I don't do a disservice to the concept, which is that for me, purpose is not about your job. It's not.
Not at all.
And I don't necessarily think it has to be something heroic and large, right? So purpose, I think finding your purpose, back to what Susan was saying about reflection, is really living every day. You know, it's your actions every day. It's the small things, you know, it's all the small things. So we're again in a kind of Instagram celebrity, larger than life, you know, you need to be the hero of everything. Everybody's the hero of the, you know.
Right.
But finding purpose again is the why you're doing what you're doing. It's not necessarily the what you're doing. So for me, it might be working on these issues, or it might be being a corporate lawyer, or it might be being an accountant, or it might be, you know, I don't know if you've read Barry Schwartz's recent book called Why We Work, but what basically, he was also on the panel with me with the History of Happiness guy. And what his research shows, and it's what all the research shows, is that if you are sort of doing something meaningful, if you're making a contribution in some way, whether it's picking up your kids, whether it's getting up on the subway because someone needs to sit down. I mean, it's all these micro steps that really create that arc of purpose for you too. So it's a reinforcing, it's top down and bottom up.
Right. I mean, we are definitely going to pull together all these insights so that people have this to refer back to. A couple of things I wanted to highlight before we go to our next question is, you're saying in a way here that there's a lot that goes to with purpose. It starts with reflection, really, and being present. So, you know, in each of your stories, there was a presence that you had in the moment to say, something's off, or I'm connecting to something. So critical reflection, and as you said, Susan, it's a lost art, but it's the heart of leadership, is being able to critically reflect. Sounds like also that purpose is a transformative process, because over time it's going to expand, it's going to change. You may have different situations that test you and bring you to a different part or a greater part of your purpose. What we say here at MetLife is, you know, purpose is not a luxury where, you know, if you're rich, you have purpose. If you don't have any, you know, financial success, you don't have purpose. Purpose is inclusive, it's ubiquitous, and it's a choice. You can either have it or not. We do believe you can work with purpose. And so the tools that we have around purpose is really you uncovering in your work life, how can you foster deep and meaningful relationships with the people that you're working with, the people that you're crossing paths every day? Are you truly collaborating? Are you listening? Do they see you? Oprah has this thing where she says, you know, people have to know that they matter and that they've been heard and that you actually see them. Is that happening in your relationships? The second thing is, are you learning and growing on the job? Are you challenging yourself? Are you being part of experiences that are transforming you? Joy, you talked about having a health challenge that helped you grow. There are all kinds of challenges, and you talked about the challenges that you faced, and you as well, Kim. In the learning and the challenge and stretch, there's an opportunity for you to grow and connect to your purpose. And last, but certainly not least in the purpose equation that we talk about here at MetLife, is impact. Does the work that you do, is it fulfilling and meaningful to you and to others? Because only you being happy, as my mom would say, ain't enough. Okay, we have to bring the southern accent in. It's not enough. But what about what you do, how it relates to others? And for us, it's aligning people's personal and core values with those values of MetLife, and then saying, how is it aligned to our organization's purpose of helping people navigate life together? If you can find what is your role in that,
Exactly.
you're doing wonderful things. So to your point, Kim, it can be small, it can be large, but just be connected to your purpose.
Right.
And the other thing I do want to say, I don't sit every day and say, wow, my job 24/7 is the most fulfilling, purposeful. Listen, I did the training when I came in, and I had to do Cyberbot for hours of figuring out how Cyberbot can get in my computer. Was that aligned to my purpose? Probably not, right? But it's great training. It's great training. But it's not. It's just to make sure that you have that compass there and that you are getting some of that out. But it's not a 24/7 thing. We all have the mundane we need to go through. We all have that. But if you can find that connection point up to say, I'm doing something meaningful in the world, I'm contributing, because these are the special gifts I bring every single day into the work, and I'm using those gifts.
And I'm using those gifts.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes.
Using what you've brought into the world. Living your dash. Okay,
Yeah,
there's so
love
many
that.
nuggets here. I have purpose posse. I'm in the dash.
I have this unique opportunity every single day at Dress for Success to see my purpose full scale. And so it often happens in the elevator in our building, where I see a woman walk in. I'm on the 7th floor, she's going to 6th. That's where we serve our women. And I see her push the button, and I see the trepidation. I see her shoulders curled over. I see the worry in her eyes. I see fear. And then sometimes I get in on the 7th floor and the woman gets in on 6th. Sometimes it's the same woman. We just happen to be leaving and going at the same time. So maybe sometimes it's a different woman. But that woman on 6 is a completely different woman than she came into the building as.
Wow.
Her shoulders are strong. Sometimes she's on her cell phone. She's digging through her bag in the elevator. And I'll never forget, one woman said to me in the elevator one day as I got in on 6, not realizing that we're connected by a staircase, and that Dress for Success is on both floors. And she said, have you ever met the people on 6? And I said, I have. And she says, they're amazing. She says, I got so much today, and it's not in the bag. And I said, thank
Wow.
you. I never shared to her who I was, and I just watched her float out the building. And so I live my purpose every day. And when I need to fill my cup, I just go one floor below. And I watch the women, I see them, I look in their eyes, I wipe away their tears, and together we're on a journey. And that's what Dress for Success has been about since we started 20 years ago. And to think we're in 163 cities, in 27 countries, and we will continue to change women and children's lives every community we get to.
Yes.
Thank you, Joy.
Beautiful.
And thanks for sharing that. MetLife is a huge supporter
They are.
of Dress for
Always
Success,
has
so
been.
we will continue with that. It has been a pleasure. I can't believe the time has come. It has been a pleasure talking to each of you. And what I want to say to our associates is thank you all for joining us for this powerful discussion. We've received some great feedback and questions from all of you on MetLife Tube. And if we didn't get an opportunity to get to your questions today, what we're going to do is make sure that we pivot over to our Yammer group. We have a GWLF Yammer group, and we will post your questions as well as answers. We had one powerful question that came in that said, what are the steps to having purpose at work? We will provide that to you on the MetLife Tube. It's funny because one of you have already said that this was even the best program that they've seen yet at MetLife, the panel that we just had. So thank you so much for that feedback. Now we're going to take a quick break, but I want to thank our guests here. And they're not even guests. I mean, they just came
We're
through.
our people.
I mean, you know, this is the posse.
We're matching. We're home.
Hey, we're home. We're at home. You can come back and join us in our home. We're going to take a quick break, and we hope you come back at 12 p.m. Eastern Time for our next webcast with a few digital disruptors. Stay tuned, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Cindy. Thank you.